And Robert says only voters of the town of Sandgate can speak. I knew that wasn't going to go over well.
Power and authority are my middle name. And if I could lord it over 120 people, it's much better than lording it over any member of my family.
I really enjoyed the task and the position, and which I think surprises some people. A lot of people come and say, you know, why are you doing this? I can't imagine doing this.
You can't very well hold a town meeting where you're doing the town's business if it's going to be WrestleMania 10.
It's still important to them, and it's important to the process too, for people to get together and talk to each other.
The first couple of years, I probably knew 95% of the people personally. This past year, if I knew half.
And so he keeps on continuing, being more adamant. What he doesn't know, and the rest of the room knows, is that Harold Beebe was sitting next to him.
Turned to the camera and I said, for those of you who are at home, get out here to the municipal meeting and be a part of democracy in action.
Who's in favor, who's making the motion of Article 1? Okay, Lee Fox. And a second. Oh, come on, get printed in the town report. Okay, Jim Salzgiver. I'm sorry, I'll get you next. Bill. No, it's Bill LaBerge. That's the pressure I have every year.
Rhys Evans, the late Rhys Evans, I had always told him, that looks interesting what you do. If you ever don't want to be moderator, let me know. And I remember it was on a Wednesday afternoon, he called me and said, Kevin, you have to run for moderator. And I said, fine, why? You know, what's going on? He says, I can't be moderator, I've been at 15 years, it's your turn. And this is about, I was trying to figure it out, it's about 16 years ago, give or take. Rhys has been dead 14 years, so. Anyway, I found out later that Rhys had a problem with Harold Beebe, the delinquent tax collector. He had mailed his taxes in by mail and they had arrived 2 days late. Harold charged him the full 8% penalty, and Rhys was upset. And he wanted to make a motion from the floor that if you mailed your taxes on the due date, they were considered timely. And he could not do that as moderator, because one of the things a moderator cannot do is take any position at all. So he had to resign in order to do that. And so he wanted me to do it. So I had to find 12 people who would sign a petition within a couple of days and get it to Denise Hebert, and that's what I did. And I've beaten unopposed handily ever since.
Yeah. So you were ready when you took the post, it sounded like. Willing and ready.
You have to have a working knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order. You're supposed to run the meeting, keep things civil. Normally you try to do that by having some ground rules. And I try to say, address all your remarks to the chair, not to each other. I insist that people use the microphone. That helps the television also, because if an opinion can't be heard by anybody, it doesn't really matter. The first few years were really pretty contentious because the school board, their budget used to be voted on the floor. And there were paper ballots for a period of 4 years, I think, until that was finally settled. And we've had our brouhahas and controversies since, but nothing quite like this first few years.
The first 4 years, and it was mainly due to the school budget vote.
Well, it was the school budget vote, and the problem with that is that there were really good arguments on both sides. One time, the Australian ballot people could say, it's more convenient and you'll get a better turnout. The people who wanted a town meeting say, yes, but you can, you hear all the arguments and you can change your mind and you can amend the vote and not just have another vote. So there were valid arguments on both sides, and eventually those who wanted the Australian ballot won out. So now the main things that are on the floor are that Burton and Long Trail School. We don't have a designated school in Dorset for high school education. So we have to vote on the floor if we're going to pay more than the state average. The thing I try to remember every year is somebody's name. I'm pretty good with names, but I begin the meeting normally by introducing the select board, having a pledge of allegiance, remembering those who might have passed away in town. And one particular year, I was introducing the select board, and Marge Freed was one of our select board. I've known Marge for years. I directed her daughter Meredith in a play, at the Dorset Playhouse when she was a little schnook. And I looked right at Marge and I said, Meredith Freed. And Marge just glared at me. And I said, well, we all know Walt Freed's wife, which was even worse. Finally, the town clerk said to me, Marge. And I go, Marge. And she goes, that's just because she told you. And the following year, Marge Freed walked up to me before the meeting and handed me a piece of paper saying, my name is Marge Freed. So I do better than most, but,
That's great.
But knowing people is important. I was thinking of, besides the contentious ones, one of the most interesting things that happened was about 4 years ago. There was a vote on whether or not to eliminate the position of delinquent tax collector. Harold Beebe had been the delinquent tax collector I don't know how long. But Bill Mallman, one of the selectmen, said we could use that 8%. We're doing a lot of the work. We want that. And in a town where you have a town manager, you can have that vote. So Bill gets up first and makes his pitch. This isn't personal. We could use the money. Nothing against Harold. And then a new person in town, his name was David Skolnick. He didn't know a lot of people, but I knew him. I had represented him. Anyway, he got up and said, I support the selectman's position. It's nothing against Harold, but I understand Harold's pretty old. He might die and all these things. And the town could use the money, but it's nothing personal against Harold, but I think we can do a better job. The whole time he's speaking, people are starting to snicker. And then they're starting to laugh at David. David has no idea why they're laughing. And so he keeps on continuing, being more adamant. What he doesn't know, and the rest of the room knows, is that Harold Beebe was sitting next to him. And he sat down, and Harold gets up to the microphone and said, my name is Harold Beebe, and I'm not dead, and I take it personally. Anyway, I think I've done a good job. We took a voice vote, and even Bill Mallman voted against the motion. It was unanimous, and everybody just decided Harold was going to be delinquent tax collector until he didn't want to be, which is what happened.
Yeah. There's got to be, after 16 years, you can only be so objective. So how do you handle your own personal feelings?
Well,
and is there a particular instance where it was a really tough year where you thought, I wish I wasn't moderator because I would stand up and
I
say
haven't
something.
had Rhys's situation. Normally your conflicts come where there's an old New Yorker cartoon where the moderator says, we'll now open the floor for speeches disguised as questions. Some people want to go on and want to have the last word. Sometimes people get up and they don't know how to speak in public and they start to ramble, and you have to steer their comment so it's meaningful. You want to make sure that people are nobody's making fun of anyone. A couple of years ago we had an issue with, it was an advisory vote, but on the meters, the electronic meters to take your electricity.
Yes, I remember
Green Mountain
that.
Power wanted
Yep.
to change that. And I remember that Justine Cook spoke very eloquently, against that. She'd worked, and Abbott Durham, another citizen, was often a gadfly. He spoke very eloquently for it, saying, if they wanted to have this break, I want the break in my bill, they can pay for it. But then there was a young man from town, and he got up and he just started rambling on about how this was going to affect women's, fertility in France and all sorts of things. And he was about to sit down, and I said, sir, are you for or against the motion? I wasn't clear. And he said, I'm against it. And I said, okay. You have to just sort of be gentle with people and make sure their points are heard. But sometimes you have to be stern with people and said, we've reached the point in the meeting where, everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. I normally let everybody have a say. I don't necessarily let everyone have 3 or 4 says.
Right.
I'll say, the chair will entertain a motion to end the debate. I normally try to use humor a little bit. Sometimes I win, sometimes my jokes aren't too good. But that's normally what you have to do. In terms of personal conflicts, I haven't really had those, particularly in the years with Act 60, when we had the school board foundations that were raising money,
Yeah.
I made it a point not to take any position at all, particularly because another town moderator in the area did, and I think that was a mistake. I also think it's part of my job to educate people. So we use Robert's Rules of Order, but if there's a voice vote, you can then ask for a show of hands. But if there's a modification of Robert's Rules, you can, if 7 people get up and say they want a paper ballot, you have to have a paper ballot. Joe Blow out there doesn't know that.
Right. So educate
And so
people
I
on the
tell people,
process.
this
Yeah.
is how this works. And sometimes people get a little impatient because I try to use Robert's Rules. So if we're amending a motion, we then have to have a motion, you know, we have to have a vote on amendment to the motion and then on the main motion. But it keeps things, you know, running. But I think it's part of my job is to tell people how to do it, not whether or not they're going to do it. Sometimes I'm praying there's not going to be a paper ballot because that's going to delay everything for 40 minutes. But I remember one of my first years, there was a fellow in the back, we were thinking about buying some land. And he got up and said, "That's wet. You haven't been there. That land's wet." And, you know, he wasn't super articulate, but that land was wet.
Point taken. Yeah.
Everybody should have, you know, there's an old poem by Emily Dickinson, which I've always thought about at town meeting. Some people get up and say 2 words and it means more than somebody going on and on. She didn't have title her poems, but it says, "I fear a man of frugal speech. I fear the silent man. Haranguer I can overtake or babbler entertain. But he who weigheth while the rest expend their furthest pound, of him alone I am wary. I fear that he is grand." That guy in the back who said the land was wet, he was a man of frugal speech, but he was eloquent.
Yeah.
And sometimes people, you know, do make points, but sometimes the people say less have more weight.
Has there ever been a year where you felt like you made a mistake?
The hardest thing is when, you know, to the all in favor of this motion say aye, aye. All opposed say no, no. Now, Rhys Evans once told me, just make a call really confidently. They'll think they're wrong. I've never really quite gone for that. And I've had times where it's really tough to call. And I've said, this is what I think. But I'll entertain a motion if somebody wants to have a show of hands.
If someone really opposes your
and
judgment.
I've gone that route when I've had to.
Yeah.
In Dorset, we have the town meeting and the school meeting the same night. They're 2 different positions, but we rotate them. And I do my very best to make sure people stay. Whatever that first meeting is, it has better attendance.
Right.
And it's just really hard to, and I give a little spiel about civil discourse and value this, and you get a say. You know, this is democracy at its finest. I mean, when we did the thing for the vote for the delinquent tax collector, we decided it that night. And every night that we vote for this tuition for Long Trail School in Burton, we're doing it that night. And people learn things. You know, that's the way only look at the ballot, look at Robert's Rules, try to be gentle with people, try to educate them. Get them to laugh if you can, normally at my own expense, so you don't know who you're talking to. And try to remember everybody's name.
Right.
That's the most frightening thing.
I guess my question is, how do you think our democracy is doing?
Well, the town meetings don't have the attendance they used to be because most of it is by Australian ballot.
And you think that's what's changed the attendance level?
By far.
Yeah.
The year we had the vote on the delinquent tax collector eliminating the position, we had much better attendance that year because there was really something that mattered on the floor. I think it's important. I'm happy that the Burton and Long Trail votes are always on the floor too, because those principals, you know, the headmasters have to show up, or one of their assistants, to really make a position. This past year, the library sent somebody to attend, because the previous year they had asked for more money, and no one was there to speak for them. I couldn't speak for them.
Right.
And all the naysayers were just left to speculate. So the select board's been very good about making sure that a lot of those votes are on the floor, at least for a time. But I think probably people say, well, I can just vote. But all you can do in a ballot is vote yes or no. You can't find out about something. And while my own bias is, well, people say, well, you can still attend the budget meeting. If you've ever been to a budget meeting, there's 1 or 2 people there.
Right.
And there's a family in town, the Mensons. They go to almost every meeting. They have immense power. And why does that immense power from? They've learned stuff. They've learned things by attending.
Participation.
Right.
Yeah.
So the playing field is level. It's there for you if you want it. Many people just have their own busy lives and things, and they make choices and they don't come. So I feel sorry when we haven't had a no vote on a school vote for a long time, but towns like Benson, Wells, Danby, happens all the time, and all they can do is have another ballot.
Right. Right.
So that's a shame.
Yeah.
Now in Peru, where Gary Evans is the moderator, everything is on the floor. It's a whole day.
You show up or
And
not.
he doesn't even know if he's moderator. But
Till he
if he
gets
shows
there.
up, he's going to be moderator because no one else wants to do it.
Right. Right.
And I have beaten unopposed handily for over 15 years, so
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody wants to be moderator. If they want, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you think the filming and the broadcasting of the select board and school board meetings has affected the process or the community or the attendance, if at all?
I originally thought it might really change things. I've been surprised to learn it doesn't change anything at all. They just forget about the camera. They just do. Obviously. I mean, Larry Malloy in Arlington can't be thinking of the camera when he talks. Or Bill Schwartz in Winhall. There's no way they're thinking about the camera. I learned, I represent about 15 towns conducting tax sales. And some night, it was clearly a rerun. I was watching the Winhall Select Board, and they start talking about me. The delinquent tax collector said, well, Kathleen Coleman said that Kevin was going to do this, but he's not doing it. I don't know why he's not doing it. He's not doing it because you didn't agree to pay me. So finally, I had my paralegal says, we're going to put a stop to this. And I got Kathleen all the information.
Oh my God.
I didn't get paid, and they're on their way. But the reruns are probably still going, saying I haven't done my job. But I learned about it through that.
I believe Mr. Tyler. I know.
Short cord.
We have you on a short leash. I never thought I'd say that.
Helen's been doing that for 60 years. Thank you.
Do you think town meeting will exist in 50 or 100 years in Vermont?
Well, I know that I won't exist in 50 or 100 years. I think Vermont has 251 towns and 251 sets of land records. We don't have much of a county system. I don't see how a town like Burlington can't really have a town meeting. It's too big.
Yeah.
But for a town like Dorset, I would like to think it would survive. It has survived for, 250 years.
Right. With the push to go time and put it all on ballot,
We're all pushed for time. It's a matter of what we do with our time.
So do you think that's a trend that more and more is going to move toward, well, we don't have time to get together, so it'll,
they'll have the opportunity to come.
Yeah.
I think it's important to preserve the opportunity for civil discourse, whether or not you take advantage of it. Not as many people go to town meeting. Not as many people go to church.
Right.
We all have time. It's what we choose to do with our time. So I choose to be here at the office during the time. I choose to allow you to come in here and take an hour out of my day because I think it's important. I have a meeting with the Dorset Conservation Commission next week. I'm going to take time out to do that. I take time out to make sure I spend time with my wife and my mother and my father. I take time to be with the Dorset players. That generally shoves golf out the window. Yeah. But we all make choices. I don't really, if you've got 4 kids and everything, you don't have all the, time in the world. But I bet you still have time to make between 7 and 9:30 on a Monday night in March.
Yeah.
I bet you have time.
And
for
so
that.
hopefully in 50 or 100 years, people will be making that.
I hope they make that
right
choice.
Yeah. What advice would you give to an incoming moderator?
I would say be authoritative, but gentle with people. I've seen moderators. Our job is to facilitate civil discourse. Terry Tyler, who has been everything in this town. I don't know if there's a position he hasn't held, but the one he said he liked least was moderator. And because he could not take a position. He didn't like not taking a position.
It's difficult for him, yeah.
So you have to know thyself.
Yeah.
Step back. You're not the show. You're not the reason that they're there. Make people aware of issues, aware of what we're talking about. Move the discussion along, but don't try to say that you're some sort of God. You're not. You're elected, and try to make it easy for them to speak, because somebody once said that one of the things that people fear the most is speaking in public. Ease that burden. Try your best to make it easy for them. There was a Frenchman who once, was standing against the barricades, and they said, "You're going to be killed." And he goes, "I'm only one, but I am one." I think it's better not to think of the big picture at a town meeting. Just think of your position.
Yeah.
Articulate your position. That's all you can do, and it might have a lot more effect. I've seen town meetings where what one person said swayed the vote. Rhys Evans, the reason that he is no longer moderator is he wanted to change the law. He wanted to change it so that if you mailed your taxes, even if it arrived later, it was deemed timely. Our ballots still say that. Now the state statute's since changed, so it's that way for everyone except for towns that opt out. But he changed how we did business. You can change things.